Minced beef in the UK is failing the people who eat it. Not in dramatic headlines, but in quiet routine ways that slip past the eye and land directly on your plate and eventually inside your body. Regulators have already flagged issues that should alarm anyone who cares about their health: fat levels that don't match the label, excess water that slows safe cooking, structural breakdown that traps underheated pockets, and temperature drift during transport that accelerates bacterial activity long before you open the pack. These are not minor glitches. They affect how safely the meat cooks, how your stomach handles it, and how much hidden fat you end up consuming, with older adults facing the highest risk when mince behaves unpredictably. So today, we break down 6 real traps in the UK minced beef aisle through 6 of the most familiar brands to show exactly what may be hiding inside the packs you bring home every week, the same packs you thought you could trust. 1. Tesco, the fake farm illusion. Tesco is the clearest place to begin because the first problem shows up before you even look at the meat itself. For years, Tesco sold minced beef under names like Boswell Farms labels that sounded local, rustic, and tied to a real British farm. They weren't. They were brand creations, and that small detail matters more than most shoppers realise. A farm-style name triggers expectations instantly. People assume smaller herds, closer oversight, and a cleaner sourcing journey. Many older shoppers believe these names reflect true origin because in the past, a farm name usually meant just that. With Boswell Farms, the associations formed long before the cooking did. The name implied a place. The supply chain was something else: processors, mixed batches, and sourcing that stretched far beyond any single farm. Nothing illegal sits behind this. No scandal. The issue is the quiet gap between the image the name builds and the reality of how large-scale mince is produced. When people think farm, they picture land and livestock. When a label uses that word even indirectly, it shapes confidence before any factual detail is checked. That confidence is the first crack in this trap. You can see the effect clearly when the mince reaches the pan. A shopper expecting farm-level quality from a brand like Boswell Farms naturally expects clean browning, predictable texture, and minimal liquid. When the meat releases more water than expected or collapses faster, the disconnect feels personal. It's not that the mince is poor, it's that the branding suggested something different. The performance breaks the mental picture the label created. The emotional impact lands strongest on people who cook regularly. They rely on mince as a routine ingredient, expecting it to behave the same each time they buy it. When branding suggests heritage, but the behavior feels industrial, trust thins. Some shoppers begin to doubt their own cooking. Others shift blame to the store. A few quietly stop buying the label altogether. Each reaction comes from the same moment of mismatch. For older shoppers, the effect is sharper. They grew up reading labels: literally farm meant farm, butcher's choice meant butcher. When Tesco or any major chain uses a crafted name like Boswell Farms, the definition shifts without warning. That shift forces them to relearn something that once felt intuitive. It turns a simple purchase into a small puzzle. And every puzzle adds friction, especially for people who don't enjoy second-guessing what they buy. The impact doesn't stop at perception. It influences how shoppers judge value. A farm-style name raises the perceived worth of a product. It nudges people toward paying a little more or feeling more secure in the mid-tier range. If the mince behaves no differently from standard own-label packs, they feel misled even if the information on the back was always accurate. The problem lies in the front of the pack, not the back. This is why Tesco becomes the anchor of the first trap. Boswell Farms isn't a scandal, it's a symbol. It shows how easily trust can be shaped by a name and how quickly that trust slips when the behavior of the product doesn't match the story implied. Once shoppers see this gap, they stop reading labels the same way. They look past the picture. They start asking where the meat actually comes from, how it's processed, and why it behaves as it does. And those questions matter because they lead directly into the next issue, one that moves from branding to the meat itself. Tesco's example opens the door, but the next trap shows the gap between what the label promises and what the mince delivers in the pan. To Asda, the fat ratio mirage. Asda is the right brand for this second problem because the gap between numbers on the label and the way the mince behaves in the pan has real consequences, especially for people relying on those numbers for their health. Many shoppers choose Asda's 5% fat or lean ranges because they're managing weight, cholesterol, or long-term conditions. The label looks precise. The reality doesn't always feel that way. Across the UK, food safety authorities have sampled supermarket beef over many years and found that fat percentages can vary from what's printed. Not illegal variation, but enough for customers to notice a difference in the pan. And Asda shoppers comment on this often. Some packs labelled lean cook, like mid-fat mince, releasing more oil and shrinking faster than expected. That small shift matters to anyone watching calories, but it matters far more to people who depend on accuracy for medical reasons. Fat isn't just a number. For people with high cholesterol, heart conditions, or metabolic issues, a few extra grams per portion every week adds up. Dietitians warn that long-term overconsumption of saturated fat raises inflammation and damages arterial health in older adults. So when a pack says 5%, customers expect that number to protect them. If the mince browns in a puddle of fat, the meal becomes something they didn't sign up for. Even younger shoppers who are trying to manage weight feel the impact. Lean mince is often chosen as a base for lighter meals. But when the fat behavior in the pan suggests something closer to 10 or 12%, the entire nutritional balance of the dish changes silently. Most people don't measure portions by gram, they trust the label. When the cooking performance contradicts it, confidence erodes. Part of the issue lies in trimming. Asda sources beef from multiple processors, and different cuts contribute different natural fat levels. Blending is normal in large-scale production, but blending also creates subtle variation. The number on the front represents a target, not an absolute. Some packs land perfectly, others drift. That drift is small enough to pass regulatory standards, yet large enough to matter to the person eating it. Cooking behavior becomes the real giveaway. A shopper expecting lean mince anticipates fast browning, firm texture, and minimal shrinkage. But when Asda's lean-labelled mince behaves like a higher-fat blend, it signals that the composition isn't as clean as the label implies. The meat may foam more in the pan. It may release a glossy layer of fat earlier than expected. These cues are unmistakable once you pay attention, and the consequences ripple beyond nutrition. For older adults, excess fat changes digestion. Meals feel heavier. Acid reflux becomes more common. People with gallbladder issues or pancreatitis can experience discomfort from slight increases in dietary fat. They rely on labels because guessing isn't an option. When a product cooks differently from what they were told to expect, they lose a layer of safety. Some shoppers adjust by draining fat aggressively, but draining doesn't fix the core issue. They paid for a lean product and prepared their meal under the assumption that it was lean. The mismatch creates frustration. Over time, it pushes people away from the brand. They begin questioning whether the number is a promise or simply a guideline. None of this suggests wrongdoing from Asda. The supermarket follows industry standards, and natural variation in mince is unavoidable. The problem is the emotional and nutritional distance between what shoppers think lean means and how the meat behaves once heat touches the pan. Labels project certainty. Real meat doesn't always follow it. That gap, the quiet space between the printed number and the lived experience, is why this trap sits here. It sets up the next problem when fat isn't the only unexpected element. Because after fat comes moisture, and that's where the behavior in the pan begins to affect flavor, texture, and trust even more deeply. 3. Morrison's and the water-heavy mince. Morrison's has always taken pride in its butchery image, so the third problem hits harder than most people expect. It appears the moment the mince touches a hot pan. 1 second you're waiting for the sizzle. The next, a pool of liquid spreads across the base, drowning the chance for any proper browning. And this isn't a rare accident. Shoppers complain about this often enough that a pattern forms. Across the UK, studies show minced beef can lose up to 28% of its weight during cooking when excess moisture is trapped inside the pack. That figure alone is startling, but what unsettles shoppers most is how inconsistent it feels. 1 week Morrison's mince browns neatly, another week it steams like a kettle. That unpredictability chips away at trust far more quickly than a simple flavour issue. This isn't just water from the meat itself. When beef is stored, transported, or ground in conditions that disturb its structure, the muscle fibres hold moisture differently. Once heat hits, everything loosens at once. The mince collapses. Foam collects along the edges. Instead of browning, it simmers. And when Morrison's positions itself as a supermarket with strong in-store butchery heritage, this behaviour lands with more weight than it does elsewhere. The moisture also changes how much of the product you're actually eating. If nearly a third evaporates or runs off as liquid, families on tight budgets feel the loss immediately. A pack that promises 4 portions quietly shrinks to 3. In a year, when food costs stretch every household, a disappearing portion isn't just inconvenient, it feels like something has been taken. For older adults, the consequences reach further. Excess water slows the rise in temperature during cooking, meaning the mince spends longer in the danger zone, where bacteria multiply fastest. Food safety specialists warn that minced beef is one of the most sensitive products in the chilled aisle because bacteria spread through the grind much more easily than through a whole cut. When moisture holds the heat back, the center of the mince warms too slowly, while the liquid around it boils. It looks like progress, but it isn't safe progress. Moisture also affects digestion. When mince releases a heavy broth, the texture turns mushy and dense. Dishes sit heavier in the stomach. For people with acid reflux or sensitive digestion, that difference is noticeable. And because Morrison's has a long-standing image of freshness, this texture shift feels like a betrayal of what customers think they're buying. Some of the causes lie in the grinding process. When meat is ground too warm, more fluid escapes from the cells. When it's ground too cold, ice crystals damage the structure, causing similar liquid release when cooked. Chilled logistics add another layer. A few minutes outside ideal temperatures during loading or unloading can change the moisture balance more than most shoppers imagine. And in large retail systems, Morrison's included such moments are difficult to avoid entirely. The dramatic part is how quickly shoppers notice the difference. One online review put it bluntly, "Half my dinner turned into water." Another said, "I don't think I cooked mince. I boiled it." These aren't dramatic people, just home cooks trying to feed their families with something predictable. Yet this isn't a scandal, it's a reminder. Moisture is the clearest sign of how well the product has been handled before it reached you. When Morrison's mince behaves differently from week to week, it reveals how sensitive the product is to small changes in storage, trimming, or grinding conditions. And that sensitivity is what prepares viewers for the next problem, because water isn't the only thing that changes how mince behaves. Once moisture raises doubts, structure becomes the next question. What holds the meat together? What makes it fall apart? And why does the same supermarket sometimes deliver 2 very different experiences? We'll see the answer now. For Sainsbury's and the hidden structure problem. Sainsbury's is the right brand for this 4th problem, because structure is where things begin to feel uneasy. Not fat, not moisture, but the physical integrity of the meat itself. And the clearest warning signs come not from mince alone, but from Sainsbury's own value-tier beef products over the years, where structure has been pushed, reshaped or reinforced long before a shopper ever touched the pack. Across the UK, consumer testing has shown that over 40% of low-cost beef products, burgers, budget, steaks, mixed, beef blocks, show signs of structural manipulation, fine grinding, uneven binding, or textures that fall apart more easily than natural muscle should. Sainsbury's has sold value-tier items of this kind before. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden from regulators. But it reveals something most shoppers never consider. Structure can be altered, and once altered, it never behaves the same. This is where the issue deepens, because many reformed beef products in the UK, including some that have appeared in Sainsbury's value ranges in the past, use forming methods to bind small pieces together into a clean, uniform shape. In the wider industry, this process can involve transglutaminase, better known as meat glue. It's legal, it's common, and it demonstrates in the simplest way how easily beef texture can be engineered. So when shoppers move from those value-tier products to Sainsbury's minced beef, they naturally expect something more stable. But if the raw material has already been through heavy grinding, mixed trimming, or temperature shifts, the structure of the mince becomes fragile even before it hits the pan. You see it immediately during cooking. The meat crumbles too fast. It refuses to hold small clumps. It breaks into tiny grains instead of forming a soft, loose crumble. In other cases, it compacts into sticky lumps the moment steam builds. These aren't signs of spoilage. They're mechanical clues the fibers inside the meat have weakened long before the shopper makes dinner. For home cooks, this becomes a practical problem. A sauce that should be rich becomes gritty. A chili loses body. Tacos have no bite. Bolognese turns pasty. And because Sainsbury's positions itself as a balanced mid-tier supermarket with reliable quality, this inconsistency feels sharper here than it would elsewhere. When the structure collapses, trust collapses with it. The health implications come from the way weak structure affects heat. Mince that falls apart too soon heats unevenly. Some pieces brown quickly, while others stay pale and cool. Food safety specialists warn that bacteria spread through minced beef more easily because everything is ground together. When the fibers are too damaged, the meat loses the natural spacing that helps heat travel evenly. It looks cooked, but pockets of underheated meat can sit hidden inside. For older adults, that difference matters. Unevenly cooked mince can cause digestive discomfort, bloating, or a general heaviness after eating. Not because the product is unsafe by law, but because the structure alters the way fat and moisture redistribute in the pan and how the body reacts to that mix. Behind all of this sits a single cold fact. A shift of just 2 or 3 degrees during grinding or storage is enough to damage the fibers and weaken the entire structure of the meat. Nothing dramatic has to happen, just a slight break in the chain, a warmer loading bay, a colder grinding plate, and the mince you cook becomes unpredictable. Shoppers feel this before they understand it. One review put it simply, "I didn't cook mince. I cooked meat dust." Another wrote, "The texture vanished and the flavor went with it." These reactions aren't exaggeration. They're what happens when structure fails silently. None of this means Sainsbury's is violating any rules. Their supply chain works like every major retailer's. But this segment reveals a truth the label never tells you: structure is fragile. It can be shaped, weakened, or stitched together with techniques like forming and elsewhere in the industry meat glue. And once shoppers begin noticing that structure doesn't always behave the way they expect, the next question becomes unavoidable. If the meat can fall apart so easily, how much can you trust the color you see on the shelf? 5 Aldi and the color confidence trap. Aldi fits the 5th problem because this one isn't about fat, moisture, or structure anymore. It's about color, the bright, confident red that convinces shoppers a pack of mince is fresher than it truly is. And Aldi's fast turnover business model makes the illusion even stronger. Low prices, high volume, and a surface that always looks good. Too good. Most shoppers don't know that over 90% of supermarket mince in the UK is packed in a modified atmosphere, a controlled mix of gases that keeps the outside of the meat red far longer than air would. Aldi uses it widely, just as the rest of the industry does. Nothing illegal, nothing unusual. But the effect is undeniable. Oxygen binds to the surface proteins, creating the cherry red pigment shoppers trust more than any label. Inside the pack, the truth looks different. Beneath that perfect exterior, the meat naturally turns brown as oxygen disappears, a normal biochemical change, not decay. But when people open a pack that looked flawless on the shelf and find deeper browning inside, a crack forms in their confidence. It's a small moment, but a strong one. The eye expected freshness. The inside told another story. The emotional impact is real. Colour is the simplest cue shoppers have. It's the one signal older customers rely on most because it doesn't require careful reading or analysis. So when a pack presents itself as fresh, but cooks like something older, that disappointment sticks. It feels like the rules changed without notice, and shoppers were the last to know. The practical side is even more important. When colour stays bright for too long, people assume the product is stable. They hold on to it longer. They thaw it slowly. They trust the red surface instead of the date. But food safety data across Europe shows that mince can carry high bacterial loads even while looking visually fresh. Colour hides the clock. It never stops it. For older adults or anyone with a weaker immune system, this mismatch matters. A meal that looks harmless can still cause digestive upset if cooked late or stored casually. Not because Aldi's product breaks the rules, but because the colour tells a comforting story that the rest of the meat cannot support, and the illusion continues in the pan. Two packs that looked identical on the shelf may behave completely differently on heat. One browns cleanly, the other releases water first. One firms up, another softens. To a shopper expecting consistency, this feels like something slipping out of their control. The colour promised sameness. The cooking delivered difference. Even the pricing plays a role. Aldi's low-cost positioning builds a sense of straightforwardness. What you see is what you get. When a bright red pack sits at a low price, the brain relaxes. Suspicion fades. The product becomes an easy choice. But colour under modified atmosphere packaging isn't a measure of trustworthiness. It's a controlled chemical effect, nothing more. Behind the scenes, all it takes is a short period outside ideal temperatures, a warm palate, a slow restock for the interior of the mince to age faster than the surface reveals. That's why some packs look perfect, but behave unpredictably later. The surface stays red because gases protect it. The inside changes because nature proceeds quietly. A reviewer summed it up bluntly. Brilliant colour. Strange cooking. Another wrote red outside, brown everywhere else. These moments shape the feeling that the product is harder to read than it should be. Aldi isn't doing anything wrong. They operate within the same industry standards as every major retailer. But this problem exposes a truth many shoppers overlook. Colour doesn't tell you freshness, it tells you the atmosphere inside the packet. And once you understand that the red glow of the meat stops being reassuring and becomes what it truly is, a signal to look deeper, not a reason to trust blindly. 6. Lidl and the hidden journey problem. Lidl is the right brand for the 6th problem because this one isn't about the meat itself anymore. It's about the journey, the hours before the pack reaches the shelf, long before the shopper sees it. And Lidl's high-volume, high-speed logistics make this journey both efficient and fragile. When everything goes right, the product holds its quality. When anything slips even briefly, the mince changes in ways no customer can detect until it's too late. Across European cold chain studies, researchers found that 1 in every 5 chilled deliveries experienced at least one temperature deviation, sometimes only 2 or 3 degrees, sometimes lasting minutes, sometimes an hour. Those tiny fluctuations sound harmless, but minced beef reacts to them more sharply than almost any other chilled product. The grind exposes more surface area, more oxygen contact, more pathways for bacteria. A small delay is enough to shift the entire behavior of the meat. This matters for Lidl because their shelves move fast. Products are constantly restocked. Pallets wait at the back of stores. Delivery doors open and close. Every one of those moments is a chance for temperature drift. And when mince warms even slightly during loading or unloading the fibers, loosen enzymes wake up and bacterial activity accelerates, even if the meat still feels cold to the touch. You see the consequences in the pan. Lidl mince can behave beautifully on some days, firm, neat browning, predictable texture. But on others, it turns soft, releases water early, or breaks down faster than expected. Shoppers often describe it as different every week, even though the label looks identical. That inconsistency doesn't come from the supermarket shelf. It comes from the hours before the shelf. For older adults, this instability carries real weight. When mince has been through temperature drift, even mild, it takes longer to cook through safely. The outside browns quickly tricking the eye, while deep inside the meat warms slowly. Safety officers warn that mince must cross safe internal temperatures because bacteria spread through the grind, not just the surface. When heat movement becomes uneven, parts of the mince can remain cooler than the cook realizes, and digestion responds to that instability. People with sensitive stomachs often report feeling heavier or mildly unwell after meals made from mince that cooked unevenly. It isn't food poisoning, it's the body reacting to protein breakdown and bacterial shifts that began during the journey, not during cooking. A number from one study shows how fragile the product really is. 5 minutes at 8 degrees Celsius, still technically chilled, was enough to raise microbial activity by 20 to 30% in minced meat. It stays cold. It looks fine. Yet its internal clock speeds up quietly. Now imagine a pallet waiting 10 minutes by a loading bay on a summer afternoon. The meat doesn't spoil, but it does change. And the shopper will only see the change when they start cooking. Lidl's system isn't worse than others. In fact, many of their logistics practices are considered efficient. But efficiency isn't the same as immunity. When thousands of packs move through dozens of points each day, no supermarket, not even Lidl, can guarantee that every moment stays perfectly within the ideal temperature window. And mince is the product most sensitive to those micro mistakes. For families watching every penny, the impact is frustrating. A pack that cooks unpredictably means meals that taste different, shrink more, or feel heavier. For elderly shoppers, it means adjusting cooking habits for reasons they can't see. And for Lidl itself, it means that the final stretch of the supply chain carries more influence over customer experience than the product's quality on the day it was produced. This trap doesn't expose wrongdoing. It exposes reality. Minced beef lives or dies by the hours no one sees. And in a system built for speed, even Lidl's efficiency can't completely protect the most fragile product in the chilled aisle. 7. How to choose minced beef with confidence. After hearing all these details, choosing minced beef can feel heavier than it should. You might look at the packs in the chilled aisle and wonder where to even begin. It doesn't have to be confusing. A few calm habits make the whole process clearer, and once you get used to them, they become second nature. The goal isn't to avoid mince, it's simply to pick it with a steadier eye. Food safety teams in the UK often remind shoppers that mince is more sensitive than other cuts because it has so much exposed surface. That's why the way you choose store and cook it matters. Knowing this takes away the guesswork. It gives you control again, which is exactly what most people want from their weekly shop. The first helpful habit is to use both your eyes and your hands. Look for packs with a clean appearance and very little liquid pooling at the bottom. Too much water is a quiet sign that the structure has loosened. Give the pack a gentle press. It should feel cold and firm. If the lid is swollen or the film looks uneven, pick another one. Those small details say a lot about how the pack has traveled. Once viewers started checking these little signs, many told me they felt instantly more confident. They felt as if they finally understood what the packaging was trying to tell them. The second habit is simple. Check the inner color when you cook. When you break apart the mince, it's normal for the inside to be browner. That doesn't mean it's unsafe. It just means the inner layers haven't been exposed to oxygen. What matters is how evenly it browns once heat spreads through. Break it up early. Let the heat reach every corner. When people try this, they often say the whole dish feels easier to manage. They stop relying on the red surface and start trusting their own cooking instincts. Time matters as well. When possible, choose packs with a shorter window between the packed on date and the use by date. A shorter window usually means the mince has spent less time in storage before reaching the shelf. It's a small indicator, but a helpful one. Many viewers who switched to this habit said their meals tasted fresher and behaved more predictably in the pan. Another helpful step is to choose the fat ratio for the dish you're cooking, not for the color on the surface. 5% works well for lighter meals. 10 to 12% offers a good balance for most everyday dishes. Higher fat mince works best when you need moisture, like in meatballs or sauces. When people started picking mince based on the dish rather than the color, they often noticed better texture and fewer surprises in the pan. Trust the smell and the cooking behavior more than the label design. If the pack smells sour when opened, don't use it. If it releases too much water, cook it in smaller batches so the pan stays hot. If browning slows, raise the heat a touch and break the mince apart more firmly. These tiny adjustments make the cooking more forgiving. Viewers who tried them said they felt more in control and far less stressed. For older adults, a little extra cooking time helps. Make sure all the pink disappears deep inside the mince. Let it rest for a moment so the heat spreads evenly. These are gentle steps, but they keep everything safer and more comfortable to digest. Many home cooks who began using these habits told me the same thing: they feel steadier now. They understand what to look for. They trust themselves more than the packaging. And they enjoy the cooking process again because they know the signals. Once you learn these small checks, choosing mince becomes clearer. You're not avoiding anything, you're simply choosing with awareness. And that's the strongest protection you can give yourself in the kitchen. In the end, minced beef isn't a simple purchase anymore. It sits at the center of a system shaped by long journeys, smart packaging, supply pressure, and the small imperfections that build up along the way. None of this means you should fear it. It only means the picture is bigger than most labels show. And once you understand that bigger picture, the choices in front of you feel steadier. Every shopper deserves clarity. Every family deserves food that behaves the way they expect. Raising these questions isn't about blame. It's about awareness, the kind that grows quietly over time and makes the weekly shop feel less like guesswork and more like informed routine. Thank you for spending this time with me. If today's breakdown helped you see the aisle in a new light, stay with the channel. There are many more stories behind everyday foods, and we'll uncover them together.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.